I mean, if we're talking about the primaries and the secondaries, right? So not necessarily a pure or tube color, because then it depends upon what the tube color is. And some of the tube colors aren't that intense. So it just depends. So as you've seen me do, you know, I really just start putting down a test, and I feel like that's too dark in value. So I'm adding white, which is going to cool it. And then I'm going to add some yellow, which will warm it back up without darkening the value back down. And that's a little better. And I'm going to just use this right now to put in these lights. And so you can see how warm it is. And I would rather go warmer because I'm going to be messing around with this and making changes. And I don't want, I mean, I can always go in and add hue to it, right, and add intensity. But if I can just get an accurate representation down from the get-go.
It seems still quite dark.
Right, well, I'm going to be playing with it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that you're always going to be missing it and making changes. And the degree to which you can hit it dead on starts to be the degree to which you can speed up your painting. But it also can be dark compared to what's around it, and I really just have a pretty light representation of the shadow. So when I'm looking at the color, here I feel like it's relatively close with a few adjustments, and like that, right? So I'm just looking at where it's lighter and where it's darker and pushing some adjustments in there. And then I can, you know, readjust. And then again, I have a small face, so I'm not going to be getting as much into detail as somebody who's doing a bigger piece. So down here on their chin, I'm going to cool this a little bit. I just took some of this bluish and I put it into my mixture, and this comes down there. So what's making this look too dark is the relative. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make adjustments to that now. Also to this cheek. So this, depending upon how she sits down, there's light on this cheek or there's not, right? And that's okay, because I'm in an unformed state here. And we have to be flexible. We can request the model move this way or that way, but at this point, I feel like I don't really need to. So when I look at this cheek, it's slightly illuminated, but it's not as light as this. And it's really, really warm. I think that's too dark, and I'm going to add, it's too dark and it's not tomato-y enough. So I'm adding some cadmium and a little bit of my lighter tones from over here to lighten up the value. That might be a little bit better. But I don't really know for sure until I get some of this in a little bit more. But before I do that, since I have this on my brush, I'm going to come up here, and it's similar.
But it's cooler, I think.
But I think it's cooler, yeah.
Okay, a little purple.
I'm just going to add a little bit of white to it, which will cool it. Because I feel that purple could be too, well, actually. So I'm adding a little white, and I'm going to grab some of this blue, which is basically essentially making it violet. It's just not going to be a very intense violet. And then it's a violet comparatively, but it still has a certain amount of yellow in it. So I'm going to be basically threading a needle here a little bit. So I'm messing around with my color, and I put a bunch of blue in there. I'm gonna add some alizarin. And so I start to cast about and go, see, so that's gonna be too violet. I'm gonna neutralize it with some cadmium orange. That's better. So I'm gonna come in here and adjust this, which is gonna help put these areas into perspective. So I'm seeing this as somewhat bluish from here. So, you know, my impression from back here, and you guys are standing back here with me, so you can see that what I see are more generalities and not as many, you know, noodly details. So this is cooler than this and darker, but it's not as cool as this. So it's really a brown, but it's relatively cool compared to the warmth here.
It almost looks green
It almost looks green.
in context of those.
So I'm not at this point parsing the differences, all right? Because the most important thing would be that this all hangs together as shadow area at this point. And I can make adjustments to these lines, you know, something that I would go back in and fix. And she's got her cheekbone over here. And the other eye socket in here. So now this starts to fall into place. So at this point, even though I'm using large brushes, I would be making drawing adjustments, right? Because I start to see where I winged out a little bit too far here, and you know, so I can readjust this. Just a second, Laura, and readjust that, okay? And then we'll let Laura have a break.
Thanks.